Let me read you something. Initial reception was divided, with some dismissing the work and others declaring it superior to the first. While several aspects were immediately acclaimed, some criticized it as overly slow-paced and convoluted. One critic noted that its narrative decisions gave its director great difficulty in maintaining its pace and narrative force, and that the shifts of its narrative gave it a structural weakness from which it never recovers. But what I just read to you was not about The Last of Us Part 2. It was about The Godfather Part 2. One of the most highly acclaimed films of all time, the chart topper on almost every site's highest-ranked movies. It was the first and now one of only 2 sequels to ever win the Best Picture Oscar, and it's even been selected for preservation in the Library of Congress. It's iconic in its cinematography, its performances, its dialogue. It's The Godfather Part 2, what else do I have to say? So I'm sure it'll come to you as much of a surprise as it did to me to find out that this film, the mammoth, pioneering work of art, the national creative triumph, the intellectually daring, gut-twisting Godfather Part 2 was not immediately loved or even liked. And especially for me, as someone who was born into an era where The Godfather Part 2 was always unquestionably the greatest, it's hard to imagine the consensus being any different. All I can do is relay accounts from when people thought differently, before The Godfather Part 2 had what is referred to as its critical reevaluation. And this got me thinking. The Last of Us Part 2, to me personally, is an integral half of a whole that is The Last of Us. In my mind, when I picture it, The Last of Us Part 2 is as much of The Last of Us as is Part 1. I think Part 2 is one of the most powerful, engaging, evocative works of art there is. And in the context of its medium and the industry surrounding it, it's a soaring beacon of achievement in so many ways. Just like The Godfather Part 2, it is a mammoth, pioneering work of art, a national creative triumph, intellectually daring, and especially gut-wrenching. And just like The Godfather Part 2, I was shocked to find out so many people hated it. Now, normally when a movie comes out, and I adore it, but a majority of others don't, I can easily reason with it. I can usually understand where people are coming from, regardless of whether or not I agree. I can say, oh, I love that narrative choice, but I can see why you found it off-putting, or yes, that part was jarring, but it just so happens to fit the niche of my tastes. My opinion is no better than yours. But with The Last of Us Part 2, there's so much I don't understand. People were so unhappy with it. But given its parallels with the cinematic giant that is The Godfather Part 2, will The Last of Us Part 2 have its own critical reevaluation? Am I just in the minority, or will people come around on it? The way I see it, the criticism out there of The Last of Us Part 2 can be divided into 2 categories: valid and invalid. An example of invalid criticism would be saying that the game is an SJW shill because the romance is between 2 women, or claiming that Abby's muscular structure is evocative of that of a transgender person, and therefore it's the evil Jews at Naughty Dog trying to push their agenda. I'm sure you know why this isn't valid criticism, but if you want to get technical, this isn't valid because it doesn't detail anything wrong with the game per se. It's coming from a separate, unrelated political place, as well as a place of pre-existing homophobia, transphobia, so on and so forth. Now, an example of valid criticism would be saying that Joel seems to act out of character by giving his name to Abby in the first place, which is what gets him killed and sets the wheels of the game in motion. Regardless of whether or not I agree, this is a valid argument. Now, while there exist these 2 wildly different forms of criticism, both have something in common in that they, in part, and only in part, come from the same place of having to do with something that is integral to video games and is itself the foundation upon which video games are made, and that is control. These types of criticism come from a place of a loss of control. Joel, the main character of the first game, the one you play as, who you control, does something you think he wouldn't do, and you have no say in the matter. It's something you wouldn't do were you in control. You are made to play as Abby for half the game. You have to play as someone you're not necessarily supposed to like. It's easy to feel like you're out of control in a situation like that. And as far as the invalid criticism goes, as fucked up as it is, these are people who are in fear of losing their status quo. Their norms, which are unjust to us, benefit them, and they're watching what they believe is a coup on their way of life. What we see as elevating new equality, they see as invading and taking from them. And with representation growing and growing in the media, it's clear they're not winning, they're losing control. So it's because of the importance and the necessity of control to video games that these narrative decisions can be so jarring when they seem to strip that away from someone. After all, people approach video games and movies completely differently. For movies, it's like a roller coaster. You sit down, you buckle up, you put your hands up, you relinquish control, and you're along for the ride. With video games, you sit down and take that controller into your hand to be in the driver's seat, be behind the wheel, be an extension of yourself within the game. You do not exist as you are within a movie. You are subjected to a movie, whereas video games take all the steps they can to make you feel as little separation between you and your character as possible, through everything from cosmetic customization to gameplay flexibility and dialogue choices, all to give the player as much control as possible. It's only human to avoid and even panic about a lack of control. It's a primal instinct. It makes sense. And because video games are all about control, it makes even more sense that people were so upset by this game, whether for genuine or xenophobic reasons. And if it's for genuine reasons, that's okay. That's fine. I'm not here trying to say that if you didn't like The Last of Us Part 2 that you're wrong or that your opinion isn't sound. My intentions here are simply to speculate if it's possible that some people might come around on the game after being put off by this intentional stripping away of control. I think Hallie Gross and Neil Druckmann are very talented, very intelligent storytellers. If you listen to any of the podcasts they've been on, it's clear that they understand the fundamentals of storytelling and of character. The story of The Last of Us Part 2 is a brutal one. It's about violence, revenge, and hate. It's supposed to make you feel disgusted. The morality of both sides of the story is intentionally gray, and you're supposed to walk away unsure and questioning. As the player, you are not afforded that pillar of righteousness that so many other games provide you with. This is an ugly, gritty world where horrible things happen, and the footing of integrity and good prevailing in the end crumbles underneath us, leaving us hanging on the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss below where those we love chip away at themselves further and further until there's nothing left. And I think Neil, Hallie, and the rest of the Naughty Dog team knew that in order for The Last of Us Part 2 to be the sucker punch it needed to be, they had to hit gamers where it hurts by blindsiding us, pinning us down, and making us watch as everything we had spins out of control. So, with this in mind, will some gamers who initially hated The Last of Us Part 2 come around on it? Will we see The Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2 become two indistinguishable halves of a universally beloved whole, just like what's become of The Godfather? Will the halting effects of losing control eventually wear off, allowing people to warm up to narrative choices they initially hated? Time will tell. Hey guys, it's Jake Quinn, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching. I know it took absolutely forever for me to finally get this video out, but it's here, and I'm wicked proud of the way it turned out. And I've actually got a couple videos planned for the near future that are somewhat like it, so if you enjoyed it, maybe consider subscribing, and hopefully after the holidays I'll be able to get to some semblance of consistency with these uploads. But until then, thank you for watching, and happy holidays.